Perfect. So, hello all, and welcome thank you for joining us, and welcome today to our second act seminar here with Vivien Goldman. My name is Ryan Anderson, and I'm the outreach manager here with Kendal at Home. Kendal at Home's courses series is designed to engage, inform, and educate members and prospective members about a wide variety of topics. And so we would be happy to hear any feedback that you have about this seminar or past seminars you may have attended, as well as ideas for future seminars, any topics of interest that you might have, any members on, if you enjoy what Vivien has to say about second acts and you have a second act that you would like to tell, we would be more than happy to talk to you about that further. A special thanks as always to Friends Foundation for the Aging, for sponsoring our programming, allowing us to put on these seminars for members and prospects and the community at large too. These sessions are not just restricted to people looking at Kendal at Home or part of Kendal at Home, but any friends, family, neighbors that you would like to be a part of this, please inform them, send them the links, send them the information. More than welcome to have them. And so please plan to join us for some upcoming programs and invite those family and friends as well. At the conclusion of today's talk, we will provide you with details on what's next. So stay tuned for that. A bit of housekeeping, as you guys are probably well aware of Zoom right now. Down in the top right hand corner, you can change your view. If you like to change a different view setting that you have, you can switch through those, as well as at the very bottom, there is both a chat and a Q&A function. So please feel free, if you have any questions throughout the seminar, please feel free to type your questions or comments into the chat and Q&A, and be more than happy to ask those questions for you. But without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Vivien Goldman. Vivien is a member of Kendal at Home who joins us out of Brookline, Massachusetts. So Vivien, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm sure through your work, we'll be able to really get a strong introduction of who you are.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Vivien. Yep.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. This is great fun. I am known, you will hear more about me as I go through this thing. I'm known as a fine art photographer. Why fine art? I don't know. It means I'm not a commercial photographer or a portrait photographer. I do fine art photographs, and I am going to show you some of mine that I've been doing. So I was already many decades into photographing when I realized that when I'm out and about, I am exploring and writing a memoir through images. Mark Adams, who's an artist who lives on Cape Cod, wrote about his work this way. There is an old trope, he said, that every painting or photograph is a self-portrait. In each drawing, he said, I try to express the essence of each subject, sometimes as an incarnation of place, and sometimes as a human expression of being. When I came to understand what I was doing, it's never a complete understanding, but an evolving one, I became conscious of my process. It was then that in addition to seeing and looking, I also began to notice something else. A moment of recognition, me in the world. A rock, a wave, stuff left in an old building, in an old abandoned room, or whatever the tide throws up on the sand as it retreats again and again. Things left behind, I see and recognize. There's always a story in the abandoned houses, the clothes left on a hanger, shoes in a closet, and things left up on the sand. So here is my memoir in photographs as far as I've gotten. My parents fled Nazi Germany in the 1930s. They had time to load trunks with plates and linens before sailing to Bombay, India. India was one of the few countries in the world that let refugees in. It's a beautiful country, and we've been very grateful to them ever since. My family, my mother, my father, my grandfather, they stayed in India for 15 years. Before one day, my mother said, right, I'm done. I was born by that time. And she said, I love this country, India. It's magnificent, it's beautiful, but I want to get back to a culture and a society that is more familiar to me. And so they loaded up the trunks again, and we all got back on the boat and we settled in San Francisco. As happens often with people in my generation with this kind of a background, no one spoke much about all that, what that upheaval had meant, what they had left behind, and who never made it. For me, I've come, since I'm a photographer, I've come to describe their experience, this family history and their experiences as a negative. This is a 4x5 negative, acetate negative. And you probably can't see it, but when you look, there is an image in here, but you have to squint through it. You have to really look to see what it is that's been captured when the shutter was released. I used a 4x5 field camera with black and white film like this for about 10 years. This is my camera, what I used for all that time. It has this is where you look, it's the ground glass. In our DSL, our cameras that we have today, you look in the viewfinder, and what you see is what you get. What's really interesting about this camera, and of course that it's, this huge negative, is that when you look through here, what you see is an image that is upside down and right to left. And what I really find interesting about that is that your brain adjusts to that. So when the first time you look in there, you go, hey, what's going on? After a very short period of time, your brain understands that what you're seeing is upside down and right to left. It's very cool. Anyway, I was shooting with this camera for a long time. When another friend of mine, who was also a photographer and a teacher, called me up and he said, a former student of mine isn't shooting anymore with this kind of a camera, and she's selling it, all of it, for $500, which was no amount of money. And do you want it? He said. And I thought, you know what? If all I do with this beautiful thing, I think it's beautiful, maybe not everyone does, but I think this is gorgeous. If I just take that camera and put it up on the mantelpiece in my living room, I'll be happy. In fact, I bought it all. Lens, filters, dark cloth, everything. And I learned a new process, a new way to look at the world. I will share with you how my photographs have evolved since that time. I now use a digital camera. That was a hard transition to make from this thing, which I really loved. I mean, I had these 4x5 negatives, which I shot, and then I developed in my darkroom, which I have in my house, and I printed it. It really was a labor of love. Well, to transition from that to a DSLR, to a camera, a digital camera wasn't easy, but I have done that. And that is what my process amounts to at the moment. So I will share with you these photographs and how they have evolved over time. I knew right away almost that I didn't want to go back to Europe and retrace my family's footsteps. Many people do, of course. They go back and they want to see everything. I didn't want to do that, but what I did want to do, I wanted to find a way to capture my questions and my feelings about that time and about my family through images. That has been my process for the last 10, 15 years. And so I have found myself attracted to deserted buildings, squinting into the interiors and trying to discern what is difficult to see, and constructing stories around what is left behind. They began, as I will right now, I've got to, no, I don't want to leave them in. How do I get, Ryan, there we go. Okay, so they began in California, and that's where I will begin my talk. I grew up on the West Coast in San Francisco.
Hey, Vivian, just
Yeah.
a quick question. Are we supposed to be seeing the pictures right now?
Yes.
So you're not sharing your screen right now. Do you mind doing that so we can see?
Well, yeah, that's the point.
We want to see the beautiful pictures, obviously.
Okay, wait, now I have to get back until I my share screen. Here we go.
Perfect, thank you.
See them? Okay.
And then if you,
Okay, great. So this is, I'm gonna get to the beginning, so sorry.
and Vivian, if you like, you could, this is Paul, you could make it so that we just see the photograph.
I'm getting there, Paul, hold on.
Okay,
I don't
thank
know
you.
why it doesn't want to let me do this. I'm sharing my screen. I'm sorry, everybody. I hate it when these things happen, but
Don't worry,
there
you're
we
among friends.
here we go. This,
Thank you.
what I wanted to tell you is those of you who know the West Coast, these images may seem familiar to you, which they might do. This particular image I took was in on the coast in Oregon. These large sea stacks right up against the coastline on the sand. And these sea caves as well, like this one, all up and down the coast. This was shot in Mendocino, where we spent many years. And these huge waves just sort of coming in and crashing onto the sand, they just captured my feeling, you know, of the turmoil and the strength of them. I will interject here for just a second. I was an only child, and very often when I'm out photographing, I realize all of a sudden that I am shooting single things in the world, like this branch. And there's a whole portfolio that I call onlys. And this is a member of that portfolio. When I was little, I would go to sleep with my window open, and the fog was just there. And I have a lifetime of love for fog, especially along the ocean. This is Navarro Beach in California. Sorry. Okay, technical difficulties, here we go. Oh.
So Vivian,
Yes.
I have a quick question. As we're seeing these images, and these are striking images, what makes you stop and say, this is what I'm taking a picture of, and this is what I'm going to photograph right here, or this is how I'm going to try and capture this image? What kind of goes through your thought process as you're walking along the beach there?
Ah, it's a great question. The first of all is that I'm just in love with this place, you know. And when I look out at this, it resonates with my feelings. I see the power of these sea stacks, of the sea, of the waves crashing against these rocks. And it resonates with me inside. You know, like the world is reaching out to me and telling me, I get what you're feeling. So that's sort of a short answer to that question. This is a place also just north of south of Mendocino called Bowling Ball Beach. And you can see why this is called Bowling Ball. These rocks that look like bowling balls just scattered along the sand. Now, farther up the coast, near the Oregon border, it's very wet up there. It's always foggy and raining. And the moss has taken hold of these branches and settled on them. Very green, very moist. This is a California redwood. It's been in a fire, as you might be able to tell. And these trees, they are like old soldiers. It is really hard to kill them as long as, you know, you don't come along with a chainsaw. Fires and things like that, they just stay. Here's a tree that was on fire and managed to survive. It's a survival thing. All that's, you know, managed to make a hole in its base and create something that's beautiful. So from California, go to North Dakota. In 1981, my husband and one-year-old daughter and myself, we moved to Boston to go to graduate school, never intending to leave San Francisco for any amount of time. But we've now been living here in Boston for over 40 years. And I was photographing. In the 2000s, 2001, 2, 3, and on, I traveled with friends to Alabama and Tennessee, North Dakota, and to Montana. And in those places, we were given permission to go into these abandoned buildings like this, what you see on the screen, these old barns and old homesteads. And when I got there, what I felt was I was where I needed and wanted to be. The farms and churches and schools were abandoned when the owners died or when they could no longer sustain them. They were simply left and let be. In these quiet and deserted homesteads, still many of them containing the barest minimums of the lives they once held, I hope to capture some of the beauty that still resides in them, in spite of the various stages of decay. And of course, I was asking, who lived here? Why did they leave? Where did they go? And why did they leave? This was a barn that held grain and corn and so on. And when I was out there, a friend of mine and I got separated, and he told me, you know, I'll meet you at the grain elevator in the barn with that thing. So I traveled down the road and was looking for him. What do I know what a grain elevator looks like? or with a barn like this looks like, where they unloaded the barn onto the thing. And he calls me and he says, well, where are you? And I said, well, I'm looking for you. Anyway, he got me there, and all I said to him was, look, I've grown up in a city. I'm a city rat. I have never in my life seen a barn like this. So we finally, we met up. This bird was not alive when I saw it. It got trapped between the pane and the curtain. These old curtains, they make me want to weep, because they clearly show a life that once was there and treasured these kinds of things, and they're now sort of torn. And somebody left this. I don't know why he left it, but he did. Don't know where he went, why he left. And then you see these something like this, which to my mind is just gorgeous. You know, it's got this grace of this old curtain that somehow managed to blow out from inside and make this gorgeous shape until it got caught on the other side. What happens, you know, when things change. So I was a dancer once, ballet, and this this torn curtain reminded me of a toe shoe. Those of you who know what toe shoes look like will recognize it. And I call this picture Point, P-O-I-N-T-E. This was a one-room schoolhouse. It doesn't exist anymore. And inside, not inside this building, but inside another school building down the road, I just imagine some students sitting on this bench, just wistfully looking outside, wishing they were out there. But then they had scratched their name and a little heart and bones on the walls of the church. This was the inside of that schoolroom, and as you can see, the birds have decided it's a good place to be when it's cold outside, and they leave their tracings in what was once a schoolroom. This was inside, this was in Rugby, North Dakota, and it was inside of the railroad station. And what you see on the side there, that's a door. Oops. Ugh. I don't know why it does this. Ryan, why does it do this? It was a door that rolled to the side, you know, to open it. And here, you know, it didn't close properly, and it let some light in, just a little bit of light that happened to illuminate this old chair, this old broken chair that happened to be right there. And I was there with my 4x5 camera, and it was a 45-minute exposure because it's really dark in there. And I was just thrilled when this came out. So we moved on from there to Decatur, to Elkmont, which is still in Tennessee. And it's in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in a place called Elkmont, which is a historic district about 3 long city streets long, bordering on a fast moving stream on the other side. It was originally built by developers who hoped to create a fancy place for wealthy people, which they called Wonderland Club. And the deal was that if you became a member of Wonderland Club, you would get a lease, a lifetime lease to live here and be here until you died. So when Tennessee and North Carolina were acquiring properties to make the park, a lot of farmers and loggers were forced to leave and start their lives in other places. So the club members for Wonderland Club, their deal was that they got a good deal on the leases. They didn't have to pay very much money. And like I said, when they died, the leases then reverted back to the National Park Service. All the leases have now expired. Everyone has died. But when I was here this year, I think it was 2015, it was the last year. So the year after I was here, all of the remaining buildings were razed to the ground, and the land was reclaiming them for the national park. That was part of the stream that I just mentioned that was behind these buildings. People could sit on their porches and watch the water bubbling by. This was a part of an old piano that was in storage there in Elkmont that I happened to come upon. And this gown was in one of the buildings. This, what I think was this graceful, once upon a time, very beautiful gown owned by the resident of this place. And you can still see the beauty of it, even as the bugs and the dirt and all the rest of it have taken hold of the material. But I just found it very poignant, saying, I was here. This is what I left. And this is just a, close up of some of the detail of that gown. This was in one of the buildings. Just the door was a refrigerator, and all that was left was the door. Why that happened, of course, I don't know. But there's old Paul Newman down at the bottom with his salad dressing and Heinz tomato ketchup. So it wasn't all that long ago, but it was certainly, that's all that was left. Some of you may know Paul Duffy. He's on this call. This is Paul's picture. When he saw it, he really liked it so much.
We need to see the whole picture.
Oh, you can't see the whole picture. There we go. Sorry. How many of these were like that? Anyway. This, of course, was in a church in Elkmont. When I came upon this, it took my breath away, even though it's old and it's coming apart. It looks like macrame, maybe it was macrame. There's a curtain on the inside of one of these buildings. And you can see down even where the panes are broken, that it's still reflecting the forest that's just behind it. People took a lot of care with their houses. You know, that's what I see with this. And in Elkmont, there was a community center. You saw the curtains there. Anyway, this is all that was left from the outside. These are the stairs that led up to the beginning of the, to get into the center. So from Elkmont in North Dakota, we went down to Decatur, Alabama, and still in search for the things I've been talking to you about. We came into the old state bank, which has been repurposed as a historical museum. Everything that was in that bank has been turned into this museum. And on the table in the center of this was this blueprint, which was once the complete part of this was a blueprint of Decatur, Alabama, and the roads and the canals that went through it.
Show us the whole picture.
Ooh. So I worked for most of my life, many years of my life, in international development, where I was working with people from all over the world, trying to make better lives for their countries, mostly in Africa, which is where I was, mostly in Africa. Anyway, after 15 years of doing that, I decided I wanted to go back to school, which I did. And I became a librarian and an archivist. I thought to myself, that is the quintessential rummaging around in artifacts and documents that have been left behind. People who, before they died, didn't manage to get all of their photographs together and all their documents together, and they just left them. That's what was left behind. And as archivists, we went in and we tried to make order out of the chaos. Not always chaotic, but those that were chaotic. Anyway, old books and old papers, I just loved then, love now. And when the archivist in this old state bank saw my love of old books, he went home, told me to come back the next day, and he brought me his own collection of old books. And he laid them out on the table and he said, "You can stay here for as long as you want, unhindered." And these are some of the pictures that I took from his generosity in that old building. This was in the back of one of the books, this beautiful script, Tom. Made me wonder who Tom was and what led him. I suppose he wanted to claim, something for himself. He did. This too, in a script that I can't read. And this, of course, not only has somebody written either a note to him or herself or signed their name, I don't know which, But I'm so taken by what happens with paper over time. You know, it creates mountain ranges and different kinds of shapes in old books and in old paper. All of these things, you know, I see a hand of someone who had been reading and was distracted or couldn't left, so they left a bookmark. This person had written something and stuck it in the book. So it's not just a piece of paper that's in a book. It's a person that arises out of something like this, which I just find just glorious. Another one of those bookmarks somebody had left. This was in the back of a Bible, and I think it was a drawing of what this person understood or thought or feared what hell was. Quite a dramatic picture, I thought. Oh, yes. And this to me is like a mountain range, or somebody had said a little while ago, it looks like a reflection, like the top is reflecting in the bottom. What it is a binding, a book binding of a book that happened to be near a window, and the sun was just shining through it. I just thought it was glorious. Whole pictures. When I'm photographing things like this, I never move anything. Some people do. They go into an abandoned building or find books or whatever they do, and they move them around and read. I don't ever do that because I just like what happens, what time has left behind. And that was what this was. This was the binding of a book that I happened to find. So when we moved to Boston and people learned of my love of the ocean, everyone said to me, go to Cape Cod. So I went to Cape Cod. And when I got here in Massachusetts, I looked out over this expanse of the other ocean. No crashing waves, no high sea stacks, no large mountains that came crawling right up to the sand. And I looked there and I thought, what? Little bloopy little waves that came in. Now, mind you, the Atlantic has its own very ferocious times and tides. But when I first got there, that's not what I saw. And so I said to myself, look, you've got to lower your horizon line. You know, where I grew up, you've seen the pictures, high mountains, thundering waves, water that's in turmoil around rocks. That's what I was used to, right? And when I got to the Cape, I said to myself, okay, just lower it down. Go and look to see where the tide meets the sand. And so that's what I found. This is the place between the Atlantic Ocean and Cape Cod Bay, with a marsh in between those two bodies of water. And this is seaweed. Seaweed that was washed up through the marsh and didn't make it out again as the tide receded and dried. And I happened to see this just as the sun was rising and, you know, illuminated what looked to me like a mountain range anywhere. but it's seaweed. So in this place, in this new to me place at the time, Cape Cod, it's a place of dunes and inlets and marshes that divides the Atlantic Ocean, like I said, from Cape Cod Bay. It is a magical place I have come to love. Here, the outgoing tide stencils mountain ranges on the sand and deserts on the sand, leaving strands of seaweed and small stones scattered in its wake as the tide goes out. The place is never the same. Seaweed lying close to the ground, creating its own shapes as it dried out. And water that got trapped somewhere on the marsh. This is the inlet that I've been talking about. It goes far into the land towards the bay and out the other side to the Atlantic Ocean. And it is controlled by the tides. And here, of course, the tide has overrun this mound of sand. And as it retreated, it's left this pattern on the ground. This is a tidal flat. Those little black things are crabs, where crabs live, where they hang out until the tide comes back. And this is the marsh and fog. And this is in the middle of the marsh. Very often this particular part of it is a pond. It's water, it's filled with water, where the tide has come up and washed over the sand. And as it retreated on this particular day, it left all this color and all this pattern and all this shape, brought down a tree on that mound of sand. I never really saw it like this again. It was just this one time. Now on the inlet, fishermen go fishing on that inlet from inland, they go out to the Atlantic Ocean and they fish. I don't know what happened here, but to me, the story I concocted is that there were fishermen who had to throw some fish off of their boat. And they landed on the sand in and amongst what I see as hieroglyphics of the footprints of the seagulls. This is what First Encounter Beach looks like. It's on the other side of the Atlantic. And all of that vegetation in the front is seagrass. And in the spring and the summer and the fall, they grow up. And in the wintertime, they all break down and look like this. This is a sand dune. I don't know what happened to it to make it look like this, but whatever it was, I really like I like how what's happened to this dune, unfortunately, may also mean that the dune is being washed away. I don't know what it looks like now, but. So this again is First Encounter Beach, and it was called First Encounter Beach because it's where the Wampanoag first encountered the Pilgrims when the Pilgrims first arrived here. And this beach, when it's at low tide, this is going out, but at real low tide, you can walk out a mile and more, way out. You can just walk out there. And it's quite stunning. And you can see what the tide leaves behind. There's another Only's picture. There I am. What was left of that bark or that tree. And there's the seagrass before they have, this is, I think, in October at sunset. So as I finish up here, I just want to say that another friend of mine who was also a photographer, he put his collection of photographs together into a book which he called My Life So Far, which I thought was quite wonderful. And I now am thinking of doing the same, to call this part of my collection, My Life So Far. It has been a journey that has allowed me to search and question and even to grieve for what came before my time in the lives of my parents before I was born. And now I have come to where I take immense pleasure in what I see and what I notice in this other coast from where I began. A healing time where, as Mark Adams had said, I try to capture the essence of this place to the extent that I am able. Thank you so much for joining me in this talk.
Well, thank you so much, Vivian. That was fantastic. Your photos are magnificent. And for anyone who has any questions for Vivian on either her photography in general or her story on that, please feel free to either type those into the Q&A or the chat at the bottom. Vivian, one question that I have for you is, I noticed that it's a lot of landscapes and a lot of things that you kind of see as they are, and there's a lack of people, animals, etc. Is that intentional? What's the story behind that?
It's a great question. I don't tend to take pictures of people. I've never really delved into thinking as to why that is the case.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have pictures of animals at the Cape.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them have died. And I have a grandson who one day said to me, he says, "Omi, he says, why do you always take pictures of dead birds?" So I do that because the way they fall on the ground, it's just another iteration of the grace that I find in the landscape. As you've seen, I didn't start off as a landscape photographer. I did books and I did other kinds of things, but yeah, mostly now it's landscapes, much to my own surprise.
Obviously COVID might have put some damper into any plans, but do you have any travel destinations that you want to seek out to take pictures of? Anything there?
Well, my family, my son's family spent 12 years in Africa,
Mhm.
in Kenya, and then in Lusaka in Zambia and South Africa. And for the last number of years, we went there to visit them. And of course, I photographed there. But since COVID, we are staying pretty close to home.
Mhm.
We have friends who actually are now in Mexico. They have gone to Mexico to live there, and we were very tempted to join them, but we both feel it's just not worth the risk right now for us. So I I walk around my neighborhood. We've got an arboretum close by. We go down to the Cape, which is only 2 hours away from Boston, from where we live. So I don't really feel that it has clipped my wings much, this in terms of photography, this pandemic. It's put a strain on all of us.
Absolutely, and we can tell by your photos, like where you are right now. There's still plenty of places to capture and amazing things to see. So as you've captured here, so you mentioned in the one where you had said with the way that everything hit, the light and everything, that you'd never seen it that way before and never have seen it again. And all I could think in my head was, well, I'm glad you got that photo in that moment then, that you could capture it, to share it with us, to tell your story, to share that moment with all of us there who were not as fortunate to see it in person. But yes.
Please do.
So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but Vivian, thank you so much again for joining us on this and sharing your photography with us all. It was amazing to see.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Paul, for asking me
You're
to.
very welcome. And thank you. I second Ryan's endorsement. That was really, really great.
I don't see who else is here, but if there are other people here, I want to just thank you for coming. It's been great.
And before people leave, I do just want to share with you all some upcoming things for Kendal at Home. I think you can see this slide here. So up next for Kendal at Home on our courses and seminars, we do have next Tuesday, January 18th at 2 p.m. is Hike the Good Hike, Advocating for Mental and Physical Health with Jesse Cody and Ty Gagne. They're going to be talking about hiking and their adventures there, and to really how to boost mental and physical health through nature. And then on Tuesday, January 26th at 6 p.m. So the following Tuesday, this is going to be primarily for potential members, their families, anyone who might be interested in joining or learning more about Kendal at Home and what we have to offer. Is going to be staying at home with Kendal at Home. It's a virtual informational seminar. It takes about 40 minutes where we go through kind of basics of Kendal at Home, and with some times for question and answers at the end. And that will be on Tuesday, January 26th, at 6 p.m. So we hope to see people there for those. On it. Vivian, you're getting some praise in the chat on people very much thanking you for this seminar and talking to us all through it. So again, thank you so much for sharing those beautiful photographs with us all. And thank you all for joining us today for this seminar, and hope to see you at future events too.
Thank you. I'm seeing here in the chat, somebody said, please increase the sound.